Hey, do you guys remember like what, 4 or 5 months ago now when we watched the Red, White, and Royal Blue trailer together and we're like, we're gonna come back and talk about this when the movie drops. And then there was a writer and actor strike, so we didn't talk about the movie when the movie dropped. What do you say we talk about that today? Because I still kind of want to talk about it. It'll be conversational. It will definitely be like the 4 months later edition of this, but I definitely still want to touch on some things that we didn't get to talk about. And I know that the comment section was very opinionated about the movie, very excited for the movie. And in that there was some discussion because I realized videos like that can bring in a lot more people than just my general babble videos. And so I do want to make clear that when I am giving like criticism or talking about things that I feared wouldn't be in the movie or that I was just worried wouldn't be done the way I wanted, this, that, or the other, I do understand the balance in moving something from the page to the screen or the page to the stage. And so I am full aware that there are cuts that have to be made. And so I was approaching that trailer video a little bit more on the fan side than the dramaturgy brain with that. And here we're gonna look at both a little bit more, still conversationally. We're not doing like in-depth text analysis, do not worry. But there were some changes that I definitely understand the why behind. And some of them I think were more successful than others. But ultimately, this movie captured my heart like it captured the heart of so many others. There were tons of fan edits coming out after the movie dropped, and there was a lot of buzz around it. And I'm a little sad because I can only imagine the buzz that would have been if the actors were allowed to go on their presumably pre-scheduled press tour. And so giving this project I was excited about its due is definitely part of this, but there is so much to dig into with this translation from page to screen because there is so much that has to be condensed and cut. And the cuts here are pretty significant, and yet it really does, I think, retain the heart of what a lot of fans are drawn to in this material, in that Alex and Henry are the heart here. And so I would like to formally apologize to Matthew Lopez for doubting you there for a little bit, because I think what he brought to this project, the eye he brought to this project, and the theatricality he brought to this project was some of what made it so successful, and I really appreciate what was there. At the same time, there are still the limitations of taking this story and condensing it into a movie, not even a short series, which I understand why they didn't do it that way, because while it would satisfy fans of the book, I think it would probably be a little too much narratively. It would have to be drug out a little bit more for new fans, and this brings in people in a lot more of an accessible way. That being said, this movie is still 2 hours, which anymore is a longer movie than many, and yet it was a speedy 2 hours. We kind of blew through a lot of the plot here, and we really did cover the big moments from the book that book fans would have gone in looking for. Now, those moments are probably condensed, but they are there, unless they have anything to do with Raphael Luna, in which case they are on the cutting room floor. And while I did have a lot of reservations about that in the trailer video, I understand why we did that, because that would have taken up a lot of narrative air. There would have been a lot needed to kind of facilitate that storyline, and we needed the narrative focus to be on Alex and Henry, because even with our cuts that really do focus on them, we are still speeding through that 2 hours. And so giving any air to another storyline like that was just not going to be feasible. So then this opens up a lot of kind of narrative questions, because like I said, we do really retain the heart of this, especially between Alex and Henry. But even with that, there are a lot of changes on the back end that have been made to serve that story in a more streamlined way for the screen and to presumably help with pacing. And so I think the way that these felt so natural is really a testament to the way that Lopez translated this to the screen, because I think it really, really worked. And so I want to start out, as we already kind of have, talking about that pacing and the plot changes and how those work together and what those are doing for the story overall, because this is a lot of like the textual work. And I didn't end up going back and rereading the book before the movie, because I knew we wouldn't be sitting down to chat about it for a while, and also I wanted to go in, ultimately I decided, to the movie without judging it by a recent reread. So I was able to still kind of of know what the emotional heartbeat of the thing was without judging it on every little change. But of course there are, like I said, some major changes here. And some of that really does boil down to Alex and Henry themselves. Now the book is of course told only through Alex's point of view, which is a point of contention for some people. We read this in my romance book club, and while I absolutely adore this novel, obviously, one of my fellow book club members struggled with only having Alex's point of view. And so here through the visual language, which we will talk about later, we get a little bit more of Henry's point of view through especially his reaction shots. And this means that even though Alex is still the focus here, we do have a little bit more balance. There is a little bit more of a give and take there, but we really are still following Alex predominantly here in relation to the politics side of the storyline, which obviously has been cut back significantly with the Raphael Luna stuff going away. And in the place of that, we have Alex trying to find his own place within his mother's re-election campaign and the addition of the Miguel storyline. So we will definitely touch on both of those, especially as both of them tie together in some ways, because in the book, so much of Alex's journey is kind of understanding himself and his sexuality. And in the movie, we kind of eliminate the coming out portion in relation to Alex understanding that about himself. We have this backstory with Miguel. We have this sense that something has happened with Miguel. And Miguel is almost kind of a combination of the friend from Alex's past in the book that he does kind of resolve things with at the end of the book, and Raphael Luna, in the sense of there is that twist, that betrayal there as well, of someone he seemingly trusted. We never get the sense, or at least I never got the sense in the movie, that we could trust Miguel. But at the same time, we are approaching this movie and the book to a large extent solely focused on Alex and Henry, so why would we ever trust this guy that is making moves on Alex in a weird coffee shop? You know what I mean? But that is to say, the book does have this aspect of Alex kind of being shaken in his identity and kind of finding himself in some way, and I think we do kind of add that to the movie through the politics storyline and him trying to find his way on his mother's campaign, because he's struggling to establish himself, establish himself as someone that can help the campaign and something more than a pretty face in some ways. And we still have that real chaotic charm, which we will probably circle back to in some ways. Now, the book does have more of an emphasis on Alex's mental health with his ADHD, which doesn't translate into the movie directly, but is still presumably part of Alex's kind of character makeup within the kind of interpretation of the character. And so I think that plopping Alex within the re-election campaign really kind of streamlines a lot, in the sense that it helps with that character development for Alex, giving Alex something to want outside of Henry or some complication, and then also the stakes of the re-election campaign, and then that is a little bit more immediate to him because he has been such a big part of it, and we see that work that has been put in a lot of ways, and so we see where the two may be having trouble realizing the future based on the kind of political present. So it just provides more immediate stakes in the journey, provides a reason Alex may go with this a little bit more at first, and a little bit more action behind the backdrop of the White House in a lot of ways, especially because with the cutting of Alex's sister June, we don't have as much of that White House trio and the White House trio banter. I love the banter we get with Nora. We could have had more Nora. To be fair, we could have had more of a lot of things, but I am so grateful for the Nora we did get. But because of that, we're not seeing as much of Alex's party boy side. We're not seeing this kind of transition from someone who's not taken seriously by the wider world to this more serious version of Alex at the end. That transition is still there, but it's more instigated by himself in a lot of ways, and Henry is helping him find that. And I love the way this is exploring this love story, helping them find each other. In that as well, in relation to the families, we have a pretty significant change. Apologies, June, you are a significant change in your elimination, but a significant change in the fact that Alex's parents do not appear to be divorced in the movie. And I sat with this for a second because I was like, I wonder what that's about. And I think ultimately it is about showing a contrast between Alex's family life, Alex's life, and Henry's life. There's a kind of wistfulness, I would argue, from Henry about the fact that he's never gotten to experience this kind of close family and this filial love. Obviously, we see it with his sister, and we do get bits of her in the movie. We eliminate a lot of her backstory from the movie, though. And so he does still have his person in his family. If for nothing else, then there is a narrative kind of sounding board. So if we have scenes with him, there is someone that he's close to that he can confide in or kind of do the narrative legwork of showing his side of things. And then we have something with Alex's family that is still aspirational for him, so he can look at it kind of wistfully. So we've got those contrasts. We've got the Miguel storyline, which now is further removed from his parents as well, because in the book, Rafael Luna is connected to his parents, is almost kind of a mentor to him. And so now Miguel is closer in age to him, and any discretion or any potential things he has leaked to Miguel is something that he is going to internalize in some ways, and it's a personal kind of obstacle to overcome. So I can see all the mechanics of the Miguel storyline. I understand why it's there. I think it's actually a really smart choice. That doesn't mean I always enjoyed it, but I definitely understood why it was there. Now, I did find it interesting because it's not resolved. And this led me to wonder if this is an open door to a sequel or not, or if it's just this idea that Henry and Alex's relationship transcends this and he doesn't need to resolve it. In the book, there is something with his old friend that needs resolving because it's something that he's left hanging. In this case, there hasn't been a betrayal on Alex's side or a miscommunication or a misconstruing on Alex's side, or at least there isn't a misinterpretation that makes Alex act in a way that he may regret or look on differently with his current circumstances. It is ultimately Miguel's betrayal, and so it's not something that maybe needs to be resolved because we have our happy ending with Henry and Alex. So it could go one of two ways with that. I'd be really interested to hear how you interpret that loose end there and whether you think it's intentionally left open or if it's left open as a way to kind of close it. So we've got a lot of changes streamlining this storyline, and like I said, we really can't waste time because there is so much ground that needs covered narratively here, and so we really are pushing it. It moves quickly. Like I said, we are speeding through this 2 hours. So with that, it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I got a lot of the scenes that I was looking forward to. Example, the turkey pardon, which we will return to. Now, to be fair, they did cut the cornetto scene, but they also gave it back to us almost immediately. I'm actually kind of shocked they cut that scene because I do think it shows a little bit of a change in the dynamic between them. It shows a little bit warming up. It makes it less jarring how quickly we move from that animosity to this texting back and forth. We'll go back to the texting, don't worry. I just keep saying, we'll go back to that, we'll go back to that, but we will. So all of these scenes are doing specific narrative and emotional work, but because we are having to move so quickly, it doesn't feel like we get to sit in the emotional beats as long as we could. Now, this isn't all the time, granted. The lake scene is gorgeous and layered. There are so many scenes that are gorgeous and layered, but it does sometimes feel like we are rushing between the emotional beats for Alex and Henry. The actors have to move kind of quickly and progress these emotions quickly, and so there aren't as many acting beats for them to kind of move through to get to these emotional states. And particularly with Alex, who is already a little bit more of a flustered and chaotic character, this comes across sometimes as not reading genuine to me. Now, I want to be clear that that's not saying it isn't genuine, and it's also not calling out the actor in any way. He really does move from that more chaotic energy to more emotional grounding and to emotional vulnerability. It really comes down, like I said, to the script moving so quickly. And again, the script is also moving in a way that it has to, so it's just kind of the nature of the beast in some ways. Now, I think some of the ways that we are visually navigating this and getting over this and providing more shorthand and ways to kind of deepen this emotional connection earlier is fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the visual language of this movie, because the fact that Matthew Lopez is a playwright and a director is part of what made me so excited about seeing him attached to the project. I think it absolutely paid off in that translation of theatricality to the screen in a way that fits the tone of the book and the movie. So this theatricality does a kind of double duty of being visually interesting and also like visually quick in some ways, while also providing an opportunity to show the deepening of this relationship so that the emotional work of the piece moves a little quicker and so that the storyline of Henry and Alex really is driving the whole thing, especially when we take out a lot of the more superfluous storylines in the book that do kind of add a lot of the extra bulk. So when I talk about this theatricality, what am I talking talking about. Primarily the texting. The way the text conversations were handled in this was so smart. I loved the way that it was treated as a dialogue between the two, and so we got to hear that emotion rather than just seeing text, but that the text was also utilized visually on screen and almost kind of became a language and indicated tone as well. And it gave us a way for these two characters to share intimate space and to kind of illustrate the progression of the intimacy visually on screen. And I think it was just so genius. It's the kind of stuff we would see on stage, the kind of stuff that lives conceptually in a rom-com, and I love it. Want to see more of it. Please keep doing things like this. And I think this is evident to the best effect during the turkey pardoning scene, and not just because it's one of my favorite scenes in the book, but it's where we get to see them sharing a bed and sharing this intimacy in this space, and we see them moving and responding to each other as if they are actively listening to the other in the same space, and yet it is movement that reads as normal within their isolated spaces. Like when Alex is turning over to kind of look more at Henry, even though he's alone, and it shows more of an interest. I just thought it was genius. It also helps move through a lot of those scenes so seamlessly without it feeling like we're jumping around in time too much and jarring. It really kind of seamlessly moves us through the development, long distance of this relationship in a visual language that we as viewers can understand and go with the kind of narrative of it to recognize that deepening connection. And then within that language of that deepening connection, we have those kind of stop in time moments between Alex and Henry when each realizes, presumably, at least it's my interpretation, you can contest below if you disagree, that they are in love with the other person. So we have it with Henry at the holiday party with Get Low, because thank goodness we kept that song, although we may have spent a majority of the budget on that song. Then with Alex at karaoke at the lake house, and I like the symmetry of those moments. I like that we get each of them having that moment and feeling the full weight of it, and also realizing that that happens at different times for both characters. And then it all connects back to the emotional center of Alex and Henry as well. Now, sometimes in the visual language, which again is furthering that connection, we do still have some jokes, because if you remember, we cut to the Washington Monument at a particularly pivotal moment. And so we have this pivotal emotional moment kind of tempered by this visual gag, and also a throwback, I would argue, as a visual reminder of the way that stories like Alex and Henry's have been censored. But we ultimately do get pretty intimate with this movie. It earns its R rating. And I think that the way that intimacy was handled in this movie was done so well. I particularly appreciate their first time in Paris, that Alex is a little unsure and that he verbalizes those insecurities. One, because it's an opportunity to kind of put Henry in the lead when later in the narrative he is going to be the more insecure one, but also because it's just so real and normalizes that vulnerability and that not knowing in a way that I think is incredibly important. And it normalizes a lot of other things that are incredibly important as well, just in set dressing. And so it does do a lot of work and is pushing a lot of character development through these little moments. And I think one of these little moments, kind of evidence of how the text is working here, and also how this movie is trusting its viewers and fans to really dig into these characters, really isolate, focus, and solve the clues of things to kind of figure a lot of this out. But when Henry and Alex first start kind of hooking up, Henry tells Alex not to fall in love with him. And at first I was like, that's a weird A Walk to Remember reference, but okay. And I should have been smarter than that, because later in the movie, if you recall, Alex does indeed fall in love with Henry, and when he tells him that is when we see the wall go up. And the way that Henry's panic attack at the lake was handled visually, I would argue is also part of the visual language, and it was so well done. I would argue that that scene alone is what made my friend in book club think that this was a dual point of view movie. Because as much as I say the text is kind of rushing some of these moments, by admittedly necessity, this moment allows us to sit in that emotion in a really significant way. And it also kind of forces us, as it is forcing Henry to face the kind of reality of the situation, it is forcing us to face the reality of the situation. Now, the way the reality of the situation kind of plays out toward the end of the movie does again feel rushed to me in terms of the emails of it all, because when the emails get leaked in the movie, it doesn't feel as glaringly obvious. Again, we are trusting our audience here to recognize which of those kind of conversations in those flashbacks to that visual language I love so much are actually emails, but we don't make it as explicit that there are emails going back and forth between these two. And so when they get leaked, we don't have as much of a sense of what is getting leaked. We just have the kind of knowledge that that's not generally a good thing, but also the utter betrayal of privacy of it all. Another reason or argument for not resolving that plot line with Miguel. So despite living in Alex's baby at the end of the movie for probably solid weeks, I did feel that the end of the movie was a little bit rushed in the resolution of the emails, and part of it was really probably related to the budget. There are definitely times in this movie you can feel the budget. For me in Paris in particularly, a lot of like the green screen stuff, I can feel the budget. Some of the rooms just feel dressed a little bit more sparse than they would have been with a bigger budget. It's just a fact of the matter. I think they did a great job with what they had, but because of that, we did not have the budget to look out the windows when they are in the King's meeting and seeing the crowd support and seeing the history of it all, while we still get that line in the movie as a kind of nod to the fans of the book. Although I'm going to be nitpicky here and admit I didn't love the line reading of the history in the movie, but I will persevere. So because we didn't get to see that reflected in the crowd, it didn't have necessarily the same weight. At the same time, it is again reflecting back on Henry and Alex and making them the center of their story. So it's more about their reaction than us as viewers seeing the crowd and how the crowd is supporting them. It's about us seeing them, seeing the crowd supporting them. And so again, making sure they're the emotional center of this and the center of the story. So there are definitely a couple of ways that you can interpret that. And then of course we move to election night, which again does feel a little bit more rushed, but it's also the sense that their personal life again has triumphed in this moment. It also presents us with an author cameo that's not nearly as jarring. I am still scarred by seeing Stephenie Meyer watch her fictional characters get married. And so anything is an improvement. We of course got a Leigh Bardugo cameo in Shadow and Bone season 1 as well. What cameo really threw me and sent me down a kind of spiral is when we have the visuals of Henry and Alex reading in the hammock. Alex is reading One Last Stop, which of course is the author's other book. And so what kind of wormhole does that open that they exist in a world in which Casey McQuiston wrote One Last Stop, but presumably did not write Red, White, and Royal Blue, unless it's a universe in which she did write Red, White, and Royal Blue, but it is fan fiction about them. There are a couple ways you could go with that, I guess, but I did find that an interesting nod. But what it really probably was, because of Amazon, was product placement, because then you can pause it and shop it when you pause Amazon Prime. I don't know. So we've covered a lot of ground here for this kind of general debrief. We, of course, haven't covered all of the ground, despite my concerns from the trailer based on how it was cut, presumably because it had to move so quickly as well. The leads did have fantastic chemistry, so this movie was just a lot of fun. We additionally had Zara stealing the scene just about every time she was in the scene. I am kind of sad, I'm not gonna lie, that we didn't get the official presidential PowerPoint, but I understand narratively why it had to go, and the fact that they slipped in the reference to the PowerPoint because they knew how much it would mean. We also still managed to get in a sick Mitch McConnell burn, so who am I to judge? Again, Zara coming in with the zingers. So with that being said, I could keep going on about every little moment in this movie I loved, obviously, but instead, why don't you tell me about all the little moments in the movie you loved and anything that may be on your mind left over from the movie. I think that it's important that we still give this movie its due, and while I of course was behind the strike 100%, I am sad that these actors didn't get their moment with this movie, because selfishly it was clear it would have been a fun press tour, but they really delivered on this, and it was such a big moment even with the strike, and I would have liked them to have that. They earned that. So with that, let me know what you thought about the movie. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to my thoughts, even significantly delayed. But like and subscribe if you feel like it, or even if you don't feel like it and just want to help me out, because it does. But most importantly, read something good, and yeah, bye.